Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Rockville and Gaithersburg, and delighted to host today's episode of Kibbitzing with Kagan, featuring Nancy. Okay, sorry, we're going to do this again. Okay, start over. Blah, blah, blah.
All right.
Okay. Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Rockville and Gaithersburg, and delighted to be hosting a Kibbitzing with Kagan episode today with Nancy Soreng of the League of Women Voters. Nancy, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So Nancy, in my view, is one of the most effective lobbyists in Annapolis. And while people think of lobbyists as sleazy rich folks lobbying for private interests, the League of Women Voters has a much different agenda. Why don't you kick us off by telling us about the League and some of the important issues that you have worked on over the years, over 23 years?
Over 23 years, and actually I have worked at the state, Montgomery County level, and also the National Capital Area League, where we do regional issues like metro funding, which we worked on a lot a few years ago.
Yep.
So you want some of the issues that we worked on? I just mentioned.
So you and I have worked together on so many issues, including a lot of election related. Why don't you put the big picture, and then we're going to dive deeply into it.
Sure. And election issues and campaign finance reform are sort of at the core of the League's mission, which is to empower voters and defend democracy. But we also have a broad range of issues that our members care about. And when we have the capacity, we've also engaged in issues related to climate change and the environment.
Black Lives Matter.
Pardon?
Black Lives Matter. You all have.
Exactly. We're very engaged in the police accountability legislation that's going to be happening this session. We also are looking to help increase our revenue stream, hopefully in a progressive and adequate way to fund Kerwin, which is another one of the issues that we're strongly supporting.
Kerwin, for those who may not know, that is a blueprint for public education in Maryland. Correct. It's a 10-year plan. Correct. And it's expensive, but it's important investment. And unfortunately, after a bipartisan victory in passing it, Governor Hogan decided to veto it.
That's right. But I think there's a lot of energy around bringing that back because it really is important to the future of Maryland.
Absolutely.
So we have many issues that we work on. In addition to that, public transportation, I had already mentioned, and government transparency, which I know is something that's very important to you. Mm-hmm. And so it's a wide variety of issues, but it's all done by volunteers. So that's when you say that's different than the sleazy lobbyist. I was at a seminar today where they was talking about how much if you earned a certain amount, then you had to register with a lobbyist. Well, I've been doing this for 22 years, and mostly it just costs me money when I have to pay for parking in Annapolis.
And to be clear, when I say sleazy lobbyist, I'm not saying that about what I believe. I'm talking about this area. Because I think the lobbyist corps in Annapolis is by and large very thoughtful, responsive, and diligent, whether they are paid or unpaid. So, so Nancy, I pulled out my very favorite button, and it says,
"Yes, I can see it."
Or you have nobody to blame but yourself. So let's talk about voting for a bit. Sure. First off, of all of the legislation that you've helped enact, what do you think has made the biggest difference for voter registration, voter engagement, voter participation?
Oh, a lot of it. And we're very fortunate in Maryland to be a progressive state where people care about voters having voting access. I think probably one of the first big changes was early voting, mm-hmm. which expanded the time when people could go to the polls and cast their ballot. I think restoring the right to vote to felons once they've served finished serving their time or are no longer incarcerated was a very important expansion. Election day registration is really important. There's a lot of reasons why people it doesn't occur to them to register until it's too late. And that's a way that they can be eliminated from the election process.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
You want more? There's a lot more, but I think that's a
long list, right? Exactly.
There's a long list, including allowing 16-year-olds to register to vote so that when they turn 18, they're ready to go, and also so that they can work at the polling places, which is incredibly important as well.
Mm-hmm. What are going to be some of the top issues? You mentioned 16-year-olds. Is there any legislation? And as you know, I've got 3 election bills, and they're not filed yet because we're still working on some of the details. Right. But are there any issues or bills that you want to feature that the League of Women Voters is going to be supporting?
Well, actually, we just finished a 2-year study on vote by mail, which is kind of ironic given that we were forced to vote by mail in the last 2 elections. It wasn't exactly done according to the best practices, but it was done well, and I think people liked it and it increased turnout. So there's several pieces of legislation on vote by mail that we will be looking at, and not everyone is our ideal. So we'll be talking to the legislators and see what we can do to come up with a proposal that makes sense. And I would have preferred we did a longer term study first, but I'm not sure that there's time to do that before the November election in 2022.
Let's talk about campaign finance reform. There are a couple of counties, including Montgomery County, that has public campaign financing, and you have the option to get matching funds or not. Why don't you talk about what aspects of that you like, or if there's anything that you're concerned about?
Well, the aspects that I like is that it lets people who are small donors feel like they're participants in electing their officials. Whereas if somebody's going to give $2,000 and you're going to give $25, you might feel like, well, what does that count? I know not all politicians look at what people's donations were before they decide how they're going to help them. But there certainly is that perception that if everybody's giving smaller donations, then everybody's support really matters to the candidate. We're strong supporters of public campaign finance, and we've always supported it for legislators as well. However, it seems that it's easier to get it going at the local level. Now, Montgomery County, Howard County, Baltimore City, and Prince George's County have all taken that on, and I think that will provide a good model. The big challenge at the state level is always the finances.
Right. So I can say that in 2018, because of the match, I wrote much bigger checks than I normally felt like I could afford. But if $100 or $150 became $600 or $750, suddenly, like, I'm a player. That's a big check.
Right.
And
Right. And we do have a gubernatorial public campaign finance program, and it has been used. In fact, used so much that they're somewhat depleted.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do like is that in Maryland, if a candidate violates our campaign finance laws and has to pay a fine, it goes into the public campaign finance fund, and I think that's nice symmetry.
Mm-hmm. So traditionally, one of the ways people know about the League of Women Voters is because they have always been at the forefront of hosting and coming up with the parameters of presidential debates. Why don't you talk about debates and transparency during campaigns?
Sure. And you may know that we haven't done debates for many, many years when the presidential candidates decided that they wanted to control the process, and we said, fine, get somebody else to do it.
Right.
But yes, in many of the local races, our local leagues are instrumental in hosting debates for their legislators, for their school boards, for their county council or their county executive. And we're very careful about how we do those. We want to treat every candidate fairly. We want to make sure that every candidate has all the information about the debate at the same time and the same information. And we train our moderators to be respectful. And we've usually had pretty good participation. But one of the reasons why we are very nonpartisan is we want the candidates to know and trust us to be fair.
Right. So one of the aspects of one of my bills is actually going to propose to require debates in Maryland. The problem is that there may be one candidate who has all the money and all the name ID, and someone else who is also a candidate who merits having voters learn more about them. And so we're proposing to set up an independent commission that will set up debates. We'll see whether that what my colleagues think of that. So you referenced nonpartisanship, which is a critical part of the credibility of the league. Has it ever, and I'm going to ask this for you personally, I mean, just as we're all watching the craziness of the past 4 years and the insurrections and the divisiveness and all that, have you ever been tempted to step out in a partisan or ideological way?
Well, I think that defending democracy isn't necessarily a partisan issue. We have a constitution that we believe in and that we think is the backbone for the way we go, both a state constitution and a federal constitution for how we operate. So I have no qualms with pointing it out when particular groups are doing something that's illegal or unconstitutional, but I don't think that's partisan. I think that's just defending democracy.
Great answer. I love that. So one of the issues that's really hard for your natural allies, like me and many of my friends and colleagues, is redistricting. And we keep struggling with it. And the league has been dogged in its efforts to try to redistricting reform. And I agree that the second district, the
third
district, John Sarbanes' seat, and John does a great job for us in Congress, but it really is embarrassing. And I always say that I have the best of both worlds, that I didn't vote for the map, but I'm really glad we are 7-1 with Andy Harris supporting the Marauders and stuff, which was horrifying. But I'm glad that we have a map that elects Democrats because I'm a Democrat. Having said that, we do need a fairer process. What's a reasonable, realistic solution?
Well, the first thing is to have standards for congressional districts. Right now, no matter how misshapen a district is, you can take it to a judge and he would say, I have no standard, or she would say, or she would say, no standard against which to judge the way this district was drawn, even though you could demonstrate that there is a way that you could get a map that kept communities together. That's one of the things that we're really is a top priority, is to not divide communities, like Anne Arundel County, for example, which is represented by at least 3 different members of Congress. I think transparency is important.
As Montgomery County is, actually. We have Trone and Sarbanes. We have 3 in Montgomery County.
Yeah, we're a little bit bigger county, but yeah, it's ridiculous the way we've chopped up communities, or Baltimore County and Baltimore City have little pieces that go in and out. So I think that standards is something that everybody could agree on. And then I also think that some transparency, that if the commissions had to meet and draw their maps in public, I think that would make a huge difference, even if you didn't tell it exactly how to draw the maps, but they better be able to defend it as they're doing it and have a reason why. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later when we talk about your transparency bill.
Yep. Okay. Well, then let's pivot to that. So as folks watching might know, along with Delegate Mark Corman, I have passed 3 years of increasingly broad transparency legislation, and we're coming up with another big one, the biggest one yet this year, especially in the time of coronavirus, when government is functioning through Zoom, through Google Meetups and all that, that any place that a reporter or a Marylander could walk into a room to watch a meeting, watch a hearing, we think it should be live streamed, and we think it should be archived and accessible to the press, to the general public. In addition, we want minutes that are considered, ratified, and within 2 business days of their approval, that they would be posted on the website. And we are proposing that that stays up for 5 years. And we just think this is fundamental. And this would be for the public portions of the meeting, not anything that's off the record, confidential about fiscal information or personnel information. And we understand that there are boards and commissions and agencies that do have that sort of agenda, but the public portion of the meetings really must be public. So you've been a great ally in all of that.
Yeah, I agree that the public has a right to know. That's one of our other fundamental beliefs, but there are rare occasions when an executive session is appropriate, but it needs to be called appropriately for the appropriate reason. And then the results also need to be recorded for the public.
Agreed. So let's talk about lobbying in 2021, because you're not going to be able to wander around the halls and knock on our doors and pop in and tell us what bills you're worried about. What is the league going to do? Have you started already? What's the plan?
Well, we have started to, try to schedule meetings with legislators so we can talk to them about our concerns, and we'll continue to do that. We we'll watch hearings. The good news is we can watch voting sessions now, which we never could before, and subcommittee hearings, which we never could before. And the other good news is that, frankly, not a lot of the members had the capacity, the time and the money to drive to Annapolis if they wanted to go to a hearing. That's one of the reasons why you saw my face over and over and over. But this year we intend to get more people involved because they can do it from the comfort of their home or they're in front of their computer. And I do hope that some of the things that they have started this session will continue, like, for example, being able to submit testimony from your own computer. They made a little bit of a step by saying you could put it on a stick, so we saved some paper, but we didn't save much time or effort when that happened.
Right. I can tell you as a legislator, that was hard. And I'm pretty tech savvy and I'm very active on social media, but it was frankly easier for me to plow through my papers on my desk and find the testimony from the league or some other advocacy organization than it is to try to find it online. It was complicated. I'm hoping it's going to go more smoothly this year.
I hope they work that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one thing that I'm a little concerned about is that you have to sign up for testimony 2 days before
72 hours in the Senate. 72 hours in the Senate.
Sometimes your fiscal notes aren't out by then.
100%.
And sometimes fiscal notes really need comment, but you won't have time to comment on them by the time the hearing comes. Yeah. And plus, it's just always such a busy time that the one thing about doing it, turning it in on the day of the hearing, was there was no confusion about when you were supposed to turn it in. You had for the last minute to polish it, to have that one more conversation with the legislator to make sure you had it right. So that's going to be a big change that maybe we'll learn to deal with, but I'm a little bit worried about that.
So just to be clear, for folks watching, I think the Senate and the House are going to have different procedures, so I can really only speak to the Senate.
They are.
I also believe that if things don't work, that President Ferguson is going to be open to doing pivots. And I think some of the committees might end up doing things a little differently. But there's a lot of TBD, to be determined, and we'll see how we can do democracy and keep legislator staff and advocates safe. But in the Senate, there's a 4-2-4. 4 in favor of the bill, 2 favorable with amendments, and 4 opposed. The sponsor of the bill gets to pick 3 of the 4 proponents. And that's what has to be done 72 hours in advance. I'm not sure that
I think the submission is 48, but but if it's for a Monday hearing, it has to be on Friday or something like that. We made it a chart. It's the only way you can figure it out is to make a flow chart.
Right. No, there's a lot we're going to learn along the way, and I suspect there will be some fits and starts on all of this. But
well, and the challenge of not knowing is we're trying to, as I mentioned, bring a lot more advocates on, teaching a lot more people how to get involved. But so many of the questions I ask, I have to answer, well, I don't know. I've never done that before. Right. We'll see. Right.
Well, that goes for all of us. We're all going to learn together. Yeah. Nancy, you just intimated exactly my last question before we go to Fast Five. The League of Women Voters traditionally, and this is a huge stereotype, but it used to be a lot of super smart women who might not have had a job outside the home. This was decades and decades ago, who wanted to be civically involved. And this was a profession for them, an avocation that was a bit of a vocation. And then obviously there were working women as well, women who worked outside the home and stuff. But when I think of the League, I think of a lot of older, mostly white women. How is it that the League has reached out to continue to stay relevant, to stay connected, to diversify membership by ethnicity, by language, and by age?
We're trying to be intentional about it, and we have had some success. And I think one of the things too is choosing issues that matter to a diverse group of people. Mm-hmm. So I think strongly engaging in this police accountability thing is important for our country, but it's also an important message for the League to give to the other residents of Maryland who are impacted by some of the police practices.
Right.
As far as younger people, one of the things we've done is set up internship programs, and we finally were able to raise enough money that we can provide stipends. So once you have young people working or working on a minimal volunteer stipend in your office, They have the skills to use social media to reach out to other people, and they do provide a different face of the league.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that this session because it's really hard to mentor an intern remotely. But hopefully, as soon as we get back to life more normal, that's another way that we're trying to change things. And then by meeting by Zoom, you can have people that work who don't want to go out in the evening for a meeting because they're tired, but they can do a Zoom meeting. So that's another way that we can get more people involved.
I agree. Just so you know, I mean, mentoring and engaging a young person, an intern through Zoom can work. We've had some really good success with that. It's not ideal, but it's possible. Talk briefly about coalitions, because one of the reasons for the League's success, in my opinion, is it's not just this small group of spokespeople, but it really is engaged with a lot of different groups. Tell us about some of the folks you work most with.
Coalitions are so important to us, not only because they bring a wealth of information, and many of them have full-time staff people, which we don't. So they can expand our capacity by providing us the information we don't have. Well, we participate in something called Everyone Votes Coalition, which obviously looks at election laws. We participate in something called Expand the Vote, which is about helping incarcerated people and formerly incarcerated people vote. We're a member of the Maryland Coalition for Police Accountability and Justice Reform. We are members of the Maryland Association of Nonprofit Organizations, which gives us a lot of information. So coalitions are very important. Oh, the Citizens Committee for the Environment. All of these things are very important for helping us to do our work and do our interaction and networking.
That's great. I'm going to talk about not just the coalition names, but also its Common Cause, it's Black.
Oh, Common Cause. Common Cause organization is a part. Yes, we work very closely with Common.
NAACP. It's, I mean, there's so many great groups. So
sure.
I'm always proud to have you guys by my side when I introduce my legislation.
But we have the good fortune now too, although we're not in Annapolis anymore, that it just turned out Common Cause, ACLU, and the League all share the same office floor.
There you go. All right.
Yeah.
So Nancy Soreng, Fast 5 for you. Here we go. So
should I be nervous?
Yes, you should be a little nervous. So first, when it is safe to travel again, where in the world would you like to go?
I would like to go out to Oregon. I know it's not very esoteric, but our family lives in Oregon. Our daughters are in Arizona and California, but the older members are there, and we always get together every holiday season, and we did not this year, and I really miss that. So we're planning to go out there.
Good. All right. What is a value that most motivates you?
Well, it's a little bit like that button you held up. If you don't vote, you can't complain. If you don't get engaged, then somebody else is going to make those decisions. So taking part, I guess.
Good. I like that. If you could have dinner with anyone living or dead, who would you choose?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess Eleanor Roosevelt.
Good one. What is your favorite sweet treat?
Oh, I'm not much of a sweets eater, but maybe a really ripe mango.
Oh my gosh, you're good. That's way too healthy. And the fifth question, Nancy, that I ask everyone at the end of these conversations, which is, what is your secret superpower? What is a talent that you have that most folks don't?
I don't know if it's a talent, but I have a fair amount of energy and I'm willing to work pretty hard.
Amen to that. You're awesome. Well, Nancy Soreng, League of Women Voters, thank you for your decades of activism, of advocacy, of standing up for all the important issues, and for the hours and hours that you have put into this. We are grateful to you.
Well, and thank you for all you do as well.
Thank you. Stay safe. Thanks for having this Kibbitzing
Yes.
afternoon with me. Stay safe.
You too.
Take care.
Bye.